Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sweetbats, and for today's video, I'll be showing how I transformed this Reboot Draculaura doll for a collaboration I joined last year. I know that the reboot is a pretty touchy subject in the Monster High community, but I have to admit that the dolls themselves do feel much sturdier. Draculaura has a molded-on smile, which I'm not a huge fan of since I like to have the ability to change features, but there are certainly projects where it can be useful and turn out looking nice. I think her knee joint got a little bit warped, but overall the joints do feel much stronger. There are pros and cons to both reboot and pre-boot, but I think I still prefer the original dolls. I know I've been gone for a long time, and I want to both apologize for this and thank those of you who have stuck around despite my absence. Despite not having much time or motivation to create given the state of the world, I do still love the hobby and community, and hope to become more active in 2021. New Year's resolutions, right? Also, I filmed these over several dates with long gaps in between, so you might notice some inconsistencies between each scene. For example, you can see the bandages on my left hand from when I accidentally poured boiling water on my fingers, but they won't stick around for the whole video. Also, since I'm very late to making and uploading this video, you may have already seen the fantastic work from the others in the Cheers Bubbly Beverage collab, but if you haven't, be sure to search hashtag CheersDollCollab2020 on Instagram to see all the fun entries. A huge thank you to the absolute sweetie, The Beta Stage, for putting together and hosting this. Everyone should know these steps by now, but for a quick recap, I set down a paper towel to catch the hair, tie off the hair if it isn't already in a ponytail, and cut as close to the scalp as possible with a sharp pair of scissors. If the hair isn't too gross, save it for a future project. Then remove the head using hot water or a blow dryer to soften the vinyl, and take needle nose pliers and forceps to scrape out the remaining bits of the hair plugs by working through the neck hole. Be especially careful on the part line. I have a habit of pressing too hard and splitting the scalp, and that's never fun to deal with. I typically use a blow dryer to avoid burning myself on the water, again, but I also have difficulty with the glue remaining pretty hard, so it may actually be overall easier to use the hot water trick. Be careful whichever method you go with, though. You can also make a cut along the back of the head and pull the hair out through that larger hole, then glue it back up. Once it's all clean, wipe the whole head down with acetone, wash it with warm soapy water, and allow it to dry. I'm not sure if it was this specific doll or all the reboots, but I found that the paint on the face was particularly stubborn and part of the eyebrow actually stained onto the vinyl, so I ended up having to use actual acetone rather than nail polish remover with acetone. It didn't fully remove that vinyl stain, but it did clean up all the bits that the nail polish remover couldn't do. But keep in mind that it is a pretty dangerous chemical and gloves should be used when handling it. Please do as I say and not as I do. Now to actually work on the customizing options. My contribution to the collab was originally a spiked Shirley Temple, which was suggested by one of my best friends and was going to be very red and punk themed with spikes on the design, something super up my alley. However, as I planned the doll and how I wanted her to look, I decided on modeling her after the actress Shirley Temple, and giving her a slight rockabilly vibe as a nod to the original punk idea, but keeping more in line with the times of Shirley. I pulled out my ring of acrylic yarn wefts to decide on the hair color, knowing that I wanted to stay with either a red like the drink, a blonde like the iconic ringlets she had as a kid, or a brown like what her hair darkened to as she got older. This weft ring is super great when you're stuck on what color hair to use, as you can compare shades, make blends, and get a general idea of a look without all the work of commitment. In the end, I decided on Heartland's Bryce Canyon with a touch of Lion Brand Jeans top stitch, cut the yarn to length and unwound it, painted the scalp to match, and began the reroot process. It's a good idea to reroot before the face-up so you don't run the risk of ruining all your hard work and by cracking the sealant and having to start all over. My reroot tool is a simple one that a lot of doll artists use, which is made by using a cut needle in the handle of an X-Acto knife, and from there I just engage in the tedious process of looping and stabbing for several hours. The best practice I've found is to do the perimeter first and go a little thicker on the part, but careful not to plug in so much that it splits. Once it's filled in enough, pour in some Fabri-Tac through the neck hole, coating every plug, and let it dry for a day. Make sure you coat everything and wait for it to dry so you don't pull out any of your hard work. Use a pet brush to get it nice and fluffy, and then use a hair straightener on low heat to smooth it out. Once it's all straight and smooth, pin the hair out of the way with an old cloth, then give the face another wipe of acetone and wash to get rid of any oils or dirt that may have transferred to the face during the reroot process. Once it's dry, spray a few layers of Mr. Super Clear on the face to set down a base for the pencils and allow it to dry. Time for my favorite part, working on the face up. I start with a red pastel for a bold lip, going for that pin-up rockabilly vibe. I don't worry about keeping it super neat at first since I can easily clean up pastels with the kneaded eraser. Once I get the shape how I want it though, I come in with more pastel on a more detailed brush to get an even color. Next, I come in with a white chalk pastel pencil for the scleras, which will not only lay down a guideline for where I want the eyes to be, but also provide a nice base for the iris when I come in with colors, which will help make them brighter and bolder. It would probably be smarter to line the eyes first and then fill in the empty spaces, but I was still deciding how I wanted the eyes to look and wasn't ready to commit to an outline just yet. Once I feel I've got an even layer of white down, I touch it up with an eraser pencil and kneaded eraser, and then lightly line the eyes with the pink pencil. I started using these half gloves to keep oils from my hands off the doll while I work on them, and I really think they're helping. I find it hard to get a precise line with pencils when I have a full glove on, so this has worked as a nice middle ground. Then I start blocking out a shape for the eyebrows with pastels, only doing half the face at first to make sure I like it. Similar to the lips, you can be a little messy with the eyebrows since it's very easy to clean them up and shape them later. I try to make the other eyebrow match, but it's usually pretty difficult as well as unrealistic to have them be exact copies. Afterward comes eyeshadow. I'm keeping the eye makeup relatively light and neutral colored to keep with the decade, keeping the lips and eyeliner more bold than the rest of the makeup. If it ends up too dark, just like with all the other pastels, pick up some of the excess with the kneaded eraser. Coming in with the pencil slightly darker than the eyeshadow, I draw in the crease of the eyelid, and then when I feel confident enough, I properly line the eyes with the black pencil. Make sure it's sharp, especially for the eyelashes and thinner lines in the inner corners of the eyes. I take a brown pencil for the eyes, sketching lightly at first to make sure I get the iris shape correct, and actually manage to be happy with my first attempt and can move on to coloring them in fully. Next, I define the brows by adding individual hairs and darkening the edges. Again, a sharp pencil is important for this part. Once the brows are properly placed, I can wing out the eyes with my sharp black pencil. I touch up a few areas in the eyes before adding a little blush to liven up the doll, trying to ensure I don't go too heavy-handed with it. Some feedback from a friend was that I actually wasn't blushing enough and my dolls looked a bit flat, so I'll be working on that in the future. However, I still want to make sure I don't go overboard with it, and instead find a nice happy medium. I add the pupils, and a lot of the remainder of the first layer was out of frame, but was mostly just building up colors a bit more and adding Pearl X powder in red russet for a pinky red sparkle. Once I'm happy with it, I can take it outside and seal it with Mr. Super Clear. Off camera, I did another layer of just building up colors, so this is the third layer I'm working on now. I add more eyelashes on this layer since I can erase any mistakes without taking all my prior work with it. I know my lashes need improvement, but I was pretty happy with how these ones turned out. I also darken the outer edge of the eyeshadow with the pencil and attempt to smudge it out a bit. I build up a few more colors, but most of this layer is beginning to add details, such as color variations in the iris, more definition and details on the lips, and highlighting. I also realize at this point I made the eyebrows too short, so I lengthened them at this stage. I add lower lashes on this layer as well, then decide to add a cute cherry design underneath one eye, trying my best to keep it in the shot and unobstructed. Didn't do so great a job of that, unfortunately. I know that I keep forgetting where the camera is and losing a lot of the process as a result, but I am working on improving my filming setup, so there should be more usable footage in upcoming videos. This is what the face looks like after this layer. The fourth layer was just more color building and emphasizing the details started in the previous layer, and I was pretty happy with the intensity of the pigments at this point, so I returned to shimmering the face with the Pearl X powder from before. I pat it on pretty lightly, but still worry about being excessive and dust some off with a fan brush. Since I don't want any sparkle in the whites of the eyes, I gently remove it with the eraser pencil, taking extra care since none of this color building has been sealed in yet. I repeat this process with Pearl X Micro Pearl. It looks so good in person, but I don't think my camera picks it up at all. Very carefully, I use an X-Acto knife to pick out the little bits that got sealed into the prior layer. Avoid this step by thoroughly dusting off your doll before sealing and making sure it dries in a clean area where nothing can settle on all your hard work. Next up is eye shines, added on with white acrylic paint, a tiny brush, and a steady hand. I was so focused on getting it right, I didn't even get it in the shot. Sorry about that. It's a little thinner than I was hoping, so I let it dry and add a second layer. Luckily, acrylic dries very fast, especially such tiny thin lines, and I managed to get this one on camera. Redemption! Once I'm happy, I can go seal this layer in. Since I'm not adding any more layers of color, I can add my Tamiya gloss. I'm pretty sure that adding MSC after gloss will react badly, and I definitely don't want to risk it, so it's my final step on the face-up. I gloss the eyes and lips, but some people don't gloss the eyes for photo purposes. Do whichever you prefer, just be careful with applying it. I've found that if using a brush that's not soft, it can scrape off the pigment, and it can sometimes pool between the lips, but that can be cleaned out with a clean brush before it dries. I add a second gloss coat after about an hour, and once that dries, I can work on the hair. I don't do the greatest job of wrapping up the hair, so unfortunately MSC gets into it and needs to be combed out. Even if it's clean, give it a good brushing anyways, since it's been pinned back for so long, especially in my case. I do typically go through with a wider tooth comb, since this flea comb has a tendency to pull the hair out of the head, but I misplaced it and didn't find it for months after filming this part. But try using a wider tooth comb first, and then one like this later if you still need it. I have a few unwanted kinks in the hair, so I carefully use a straightener to try and smooth these out without touching the face up. If you turn the heat up too high, you can melt the hair, so just be very careful with this step. I did have my straightener on the highest heat, but I just used the warmed up outside plastic to try to straighten it instead of the actual plates. I was too scared to use the straightener normally on low heat so close to the face, and I'm relieved to say that my attempt worked. I'm going to be curling her hair since, after all, it wouldn't be Shirley Temple without the iconic ringlets. I reattach the head to the body, then section off the hair and begin the tedious process of curling. I use a thin knitting needle to section off a nice even row or two of plugs, clipping the rest out of the way. Then, working with a small section at a time, I heat up a crochet hook with a straightener, put on my silicone finger grips to protect me from the heat, then struggle to figure out how to actually curl it well. Once I get it to wrap around, I hold it in place for a while, carefully slide out the curler, and it didn't work at all. I tried wrapping the hair around the curler and then applying the heat, which ended up being even less effective. I thought I figured it out by getting the curler hot and applying it to the base first, then wrapping the rest of the hair tightly around instead of starting from the ends and curling up to the roots, even burning myself in the process. But it still wasn't giving the effect I wanted. I tried to split the curl, but that just ended up ruining it and causing it to fall out. I then tried heating up the knitting needle, using the same technique, plus also twisting the needle to try and make the ringlet as tight as possible, and it finally gave me the result I was looking for. I don't worry about the ends as much, since I'm going to be cutting the hair afterward. My main worry is how long it's going to take to curl all this hair. Here's an update with 2 rows done. I'm starting at the back layers of the hair and moving up, so all my early practice curls will be covered by the better ones. As you can see here, the ringlets are getting much better, but there's so many of them. About 7 hours later, I finally finished the last ringlet. Remind me to never do this hairstyle again. Because of my bad film setup, sorry guys, I'm working on it, I wasn't able to film how I styled the front of the hair, so I attempted to recreate it with a spare weft I had. Basically, I trimmed the hair and attached the ends to a thick straw with a bobby pin, applied a thin layer of hair wax to help it stick, then rolled the hair up from the ends to the roots and secured it at the roots with another bobby pin. For extra hold, I used some hairspray, which also went all over the ringlets as well. No way am I letting a full day of work fall out. After letting 24 hours pass, I crossed my fingers that it worked and let out the curlers. I'm honestly surprised at how well it worked with only minimal touch-ups needed. I had to force myself to stop touching the hair. It was just so satisfying I couldn't help myself. Also, I forgot to do this myself, but adding it in for anyone who wants to struggle less than me. Make a cut down the length of the straw so that you can simply squeeze it to make it thinner and slide it out of the hair that way. After sanding down and buffing the body, I can add blush to help bring it to life a bit more. I blushed the body earlier in the process since I didn't want to spend so much time on the hair and ruin it during the reattachment process, hence why she's now headless for this segment. But adding it into the video now so there's less jumping between parts of the doll. Sorry for the continuity error. Similar to the other pastels, I worry about them being too dark, so I start off light, but soon realize it's way too light and looks like I'm not doing anything. I end up going a shade darker and blending it out with my gloves, using the original lighter pink for more subtle areas, and that seems to work a little better. The actual joints seem to pick up more pastel than the rest of the plastic, so just keep that in mind. Also, since I'm always looking to improve my videos, do you guys prefer having sped up content showing pretty much everything start to finish, or bits in real time that jump between the progress being made? Let me know! I'm always so blown away at how much of a difference body blushing makes. I really need to incorporate it into my dolls more often. I'm still not comfortable with sewing, much less able to do it in frame, so I do everything off camera, as always using patterns from DG Requiem with slight modifications. I took the 50s swing pattern and made a waistband to keep it as a circle skirt rather than a full dress, and I think I used the business pattern for the shirt, cropping it and leaving extra fabric to make it a tie front shirt. I actually started on the sewing right when businesses were beginning to shut down, so I wasn't able to get a proper fabric. I ended up making a skirt from some other appropriate fabric I had in order to get pictures done for the collab, but it wasn't until several months had passed I was able to get a cherry print fabric like I envisioned and remake the skirt proper. I'm also not great at shoe making, so I go into my collection of shoes to find some that match well enough, though I'd like to make shoes that match her better in the future. And with that, lovely Miss Shirley Temple is officially finished! I had a lot of fun making her, and I'm really sorry it took this long to get the video out. This past year has been very eventful, both personally and in the same way that everyone else is experiencing, but I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I'm hoping to be able to devote more time to crafting this year, and if you're interested in seeing what progress I'm making, go ahead and check out my Instagram at sweetbatsOOAK. I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.